What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Talking Elite Fitness. I'm Sean Woodland, joined as always by Lauren Khalil. Lauren, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you today, Sean?
I'm good. It's early. I just had my coffee, but I'm good to go. And featuring Tommy Marquez. Tommy, what's up?
You can tell which time zones we're in because Lauren looks like ready to go, and you and I just look like someone dragged us out of bed and put a burlap sack over our head and beat us for 5 minutes.
I mean, which is fairly accurate, save the beating. But yeah, we're gonna make this work. We got a really good guest today. We're gonna be talking to Tim Paulson with Proven. We're gonna be kind of recapping quarterfinals from a coach's / athlete's perspective, because obviously there was a lot of talk about that system going in, and so I think we would like to debrief it as we barrel into semifinals. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Thirdzy. You can head to thirdzy.com and use the code TEF, and you will receive 20% off on their rest and recovery collagen. It has all kinds of great ingredients in it, like magnesium, L-theanine, GABA, L-theanine. It's early. Stuff that isn't habit forming and helps you calm your central nervous system, get to sleep faster, stay asleep longer, and get the most out of your sleep. There's no melatonin in it, so it is not habit forming, and it's got that collagen protein in it. So, if you're a master's athlete and you got to, help support them joints, get that collagen protein. It's a fantastic product made by great people. We swear by it. It's the first thing I pack whenever I go on the road because it absolutely helps me get the most out of the sleep that I do get. That address again is thirdzy.com. Use the code TEF, or you can just scan the little QR code right down there if you're watching it, and it takes you right there. Get on board the Thirdzy train. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's bring in our guest. He's a 7-time CrossFit Games athlete, 6-time individuals, 1 as a team. Absolutely count that. And he is the coach extraordinaire, one of the coaches extraordinaire at Proven. He's Tim Paulson. Tim, how you doing, man?
What's up, guys? It's good to see you all. I missed you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. Where does this podcast find you today?
I am at home in my garage gym. So yeah, I would spin it around, but I've got 3 screens hooked up, and yeah, it's kind of hard to turn the laptop around, but garage gym / office, which is my happy place.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to have you on because we always appreciate your candor and your insight, and we wanted to talk about quarterfinals because obviously, every year going into quarterfinals, there is, I don't want to say controversy, but there's something that sparks conversation. So when you get to this stage of the season, you're coming out of the open, going into quarterfinals, what's the general approach that coaches and athletes take given the information that they are handed going in?
Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, it differs kind of athlete to athlete. And this is kind of the unique spot that I think we're in with this qualifying structure right now, is that for some athletes, quarterfinals almost didn't matter. Like, because each semifinal has their own unique qualifying process. Like, they can invite athletes from the games last year. They have their own qualifier. They have quarterfinals. Because you have all those different avenues, like I had a couple of my athletes, like Liv and Chris, that their placement in quarterfinals didn't affect their competitive season at all. They actually they got invites to both Syndicate and Legends and Mayhem. So they have access to all the semifinals they want. So for them, quarterfinals was kind of just checking the box, making sure we are in a good place, making sure we're happy with where their fitness is at. And, just kind of in a competition setting, we know where we are, see if we can get any more data going into the season. Whereas for a lot of people, it's the exact opposite. Like, we have to get a semifinal spot. Otherwise our season's over here. So yeah, I think a lot of your like semifinal athletes or kind of fringe or up and coming semifinals folks are pretty confidently going to qualify for online semis. Like top 2000, I feel like is a pretty good barrier that you're going to have a pretty healthy pool of athletes there. But for the in-person semis, it was definitely a lot more stressful just because of how the qualifying process is set up right now, where a lot of the competitions that are using quarterfinals are just looking at the worldwide leaderboard and they're just inviting down it. So you're basically inviting the same pool of athletes to a lot of these events. And then you are kind of waiting for the backfill process to work out and see where that shakes your athlete out. Like, it's not, a lot of them are not regional, so like, especially the North American ones, it's just, they're inviting worldwide. So I think the stress level was very different depending on which client you had in mind, you were catering to, and kind of what your athletes' goals were and kind of where they are.
What do you think that system then does for kind of the longevity of the sport. If we have the same athletes doing multiple semifinals, do you think that barrier to entry, if we look like 2, 3, 5 years down the line, that the depth of field is going to look much different if, these typical semifinals bubble athletes aren't getting that experience with the elites that we know probably will be okay to make it to a semifinal?
I mean, I think it's definitely a problem. Like, I don't think it's a good place to be for the next generation of the sport because, like if you're not qualifying for a semifinal, granted, like we have out of season events where you can, kind of, grind your competitive teeth and you can get your feet under yourself, whether it's Rogue or Wadapalooza, like there's plenty of premier events that you can go to. But at the end of the day, all these guys and girls want to compete in the sport of CrossFit. They want to compete in the game season. So it definitely limits the opportunities for those athletes, or at least makes them a little bit kind of muddier and more confusing, just without like, I have to be worried about, I have to go do two separate qualifiers, and then I also have to do quarterfinals. And like, it just kind of becomes a lot on the athletes depending on the timing and stuff like that. And that's something we talked about, like, as a coaching staff, like last weekend at quarterfinals, like I was lucky enough to be down in Nashville with everybody. We had like 15 athletes on site doing it. And just like as a coaching team talking about it, like it is kind of hard, and I think it does limit the opportunities that these up and coming athletes are going to have to kind of cut their competitive teeth. But I guess hopefully the positive flip side to that, at least for us, like as a brand, is we're providing that opportunity to athletes at headquarters. Like we have Proven HQ where those next tiers, those up and coming athletes, I had one personally who was down at HQ for the first time, is very much right on the fringe of semifinals. And she was able to come in and like see what it looks like when a Liv and a Kyra and a Lucy, when they race a work, like, you see what the tip of the spear looks like and you get that exposure. And also, athletes like Riley or Kendall or Anthony who are in-house and are definitely semifinals level. So you get to see all those athletes racing together on a competition weekend. And even though their opportunities might be a little bit more limited in season because of the qualifying process, we're still able to get that to our athletes at least. So like Team is in a good place, I would say, as far as like athlete development goes. But it is kind of frustrating from a season standpoint because, you see those athletes who are undoubtedly fit enough to be at a semifinal. And it's just because of the, like because they didn't do X, Y, or Z qualifier. And like, it just poses some problems, especially because the qualifier, the competition they want to do is syndicate, or they want to do something in North America. They don't want to go to Asia and fly over there to compete. Like they want to compete here by their home. So
yeah,
pluses and minuses for sure.
Yeah, and so then what did ultimately the I guess the program for quarterfinals set up like for Proven? Because you mentioned 15, you mentioned a handful of athletes at all different levels that are at trying to get different things out of quarterfinals right now. How did you guys sort and rank that, and what was the kind of the weekend setup? Did you have a hierarchy of how athletes would attack this? And was there like, I don't want to say priority, because obviously if Liv doesn't need to qualify, but she can provide some good data and some good feedback. Like, how was that arranged?
So we didn't do it intentionally, but it kind of ended up working out really nicely just because, every athlete talked to their coach and decided their schedule, independent of everyone else. Like we decided what was the best schedule for each athlete in order to make sure that they optimize their weekend. Because regardless of your goals, it's still an opportunity to compete. And we want to make sure that like, okay, I know exactly where Liv is, like I know she's giving each of these a proper rip and it's exactly where her fitness is. Granted, we may not choose to retest and things like that, which is, obviously not here or there. But it ended up being that we pretty much half the athletes started with event 4, half started with event 2. So everybody kind of got that initial data point of like, oh, okay, I did 2 first, but now I know exactly what 4 is going to kind of look like. Like I know what some scores might be, and you get that touch point for athletes. And I think our semifinal hopefuls definitely stretched the weekend out a little bit more. They did 1 event per day. They saved some retests for Sunday afternoon for Monday. So they definitely got to view a little bit more, kind of scores and performances throughout the weekend to kind of help us guide them a little bit. So I wouldn't say our games athletes were our testing dummies necessarily, but it kind of just ended up working out that way. Like it wasn't intentional. We didn't do that on purpose, but just because of the way that we structured it for each athlete, what they can handle on a given day, I think our semifinals folks did end up seeing a lot more. So they kind of knew what the benchmark was. And we had a little bit better idea as coaches of like, okay, this is roughly where I need to try to get this athlete. We need to try to have some game plan put together. This is kind of the goal time we have in mind. So it did give a little bit more guidance for our athletes that were maybe a little bit more fringe, looking to, to kind of break through more so, but also at the same time, just get in the races. Like in some workouts, it's like, you just need to race. Like, the overhead squat burpee workouts, like, you just need to go fast. It doesn't matter if you look at it or not. Like, you just have to go fast, and we're going to put you in an environment that hopefully encourages you and pushes you to go fast. Like, you don't need to think about this workout.
I want to talk about the system itself, because there are really like two schools of thought here. One that goes back, to the old sanctional days, where it was like, I love the fact that the athletes have a choice. They can compete where they want. If they lose, if they don't qualify one time, they can go someplace else. And then there's the whole, we need uniformity. We need, open, and then a certain amount gets to quarterfinals, and then you need to be told where you're going after that to kind of keep it clean. And I'd be interested to get your thoughts on what you think is best for the season, because you mentioned we had athletes that qualified out of the open, they were good, and now we've got to go through. We have athletes who've got to go through quarterfinals, and it's a different path for everybody.
Yeah, man. I was definitely given some shit this past weekend from some of my coaching friends for being a little bit more of like an old school purist. I think I definitely, probably just because of my background, because of the way that I went through the season for most of my career, like, I tend to lean back more towards the old system, but hopefully with some improvements. Like, at the end of the day, I don't love only having one singular opportunity to advance your season to the games. So, like, I like that part of semifinals where you can pick, I think 2 or 3 events is a perfect top end for what an athlete should hopefully have to qualify for the pinnacle of their sport. Like, I think it's good to have 2 or 3 opportunities. I don't think it's necessarily like one weekend all in. There was plenty of flaws with the old system, as far as like regions being overloaded, underloaded, being top heavy, being too deep. So, like, there's definitely a happy middle ground, but I think where we're in right now is definitely not ideal, just in the sense that there isn't enough uniformity. Like, I would like to see a little bit more, whether it's from a programming standpoint or an advancement standpoint, how slots are allocated. I think you could make some tweaks where maybe there is, like, if we have online semifinals at the end, that's almost like a guaranteed opportunity for most people who should have a shot at the games. Anybody who has a realistic shot at the games should be able to qualify for that event through quarterfinals. So that kind of checks the box as far as like, okay, a lot of these athletes have one shot at least. And then the goal would be to find some, in my opinion, is to find some middle ground where they have a realistic opportunity to earn 1 or 2 in-person options as well. And I just don't know that this current system gives that, because I think especially for North America, because it is so dense, it is so competitive, the field is so deep. If every qualifier in North America uses essentially the same qualifying process and invites the same athletes, you don't get those kind of diverse opportunities, especially if we're talking about, your athletes from the games last year getting invites. They're kind of out of the field, and that means that really top tier of semifinal athletes, they're going to get all the invites, and they're probably going to take them because they want those 2 or 3 opportunities. So, they're going to be willing to go 2 to 3 weekends in a month to try to get their game spot, because that's what they need. That's their goal. They want the exposure. They want those multiple shots at the games. So yeah, I guess I would like a happy middle ground of sanctionals and semifinals. And again, I don't have like a full, I guess those are kind of the principles that I would want to see applied to how we kind of sort that qualifying process out. Whether it's syndicate is like a North America East event where it's like, okay, and but CrossFit would kind of have to decide like, okay, maybe Legends is a North America West, Syndicate is a North America East, and then the other one is an amalgamation. It's just a North America event, and like that, because at least then you get a little bit of regional diversity. You give those athletes a little bit higher chance of, like, I was 120th in the world in quarterfinals, but I was actually 30th in North America East. So like, if I'm in North America East, I actually have a really good shot to get an invite to a semifinal. Whereas if it's worldwide based, I don't have as good of a chance. Like, I'm going to be relying on a lot of these Europeans and Aussies saying no, and hopefully the North Americans are maybe being a little bit smarter and they're only picking one event. So it just kind of, yeah, it just kind of takes away that ability to be a standout in your region and get a shot.
Yeah.
So then do you guys have athletes, and maybe not specifically at Proven, but if you have friends that are coaches, whether it's other training camps or independently, that have athletes that they are recommending to not compete at a semifinal in the Northeast because maybe their chances are better if they go to one of these other competitions abroad because, whether the depth of field isn't as strong or whether people just don't want to spend that money. So it benefits them well. Where does it fall with that thinking?
I think it's a little bit rarer than what we see back in the peak of sanctionals era. You would see Fikowski laying claim to China, and you would kind of see that laying your stake and being like, hey, I dare you. I'm going here. I dare you to come here too and beat me. There's a little bit less of that. I think mostly just from just a financial and a planning and a feasibility standpoint. It just become difficult. It's just tough to kind of travel all around, especially because I think at the end of the day, a lot of these athletes, they want to qualify for the games, but they want to compete in their marquee events in their region, especially for a lot of our, Nashville based crew, they want to go to Syndicate. They want to go to Mayhem. Those are their regional events. They want to be there competing with the best in the sport and the best at their level. And so yeah, I don't think there's as much of it. And I can say, at least personally, from my roster of athletes, there's definitely not nearly as much kind of region shopping as there was back in the day, with the sanctional events. I don't have a lot of athletes that were like, hey, I'm gonna prioritize the Rebel Renegade games, or I'm gonna prioritize Far East and I'm gonna try to make that happen. And I think mostly just because it's a big lift and a tough ask, on the athlete, especially if they have online semifinals and we have quarterfinals and we're trying to kind of peak and structure around all that. And, we're talking about 2 weeks of travel to make one of those happen. It just kind of, yeah, I think the feasibility of it is just not, it just provides more barriers than opportunities for the most part.
Mm-hmm. And I want to kind of narrow down on quarterfinals just a little bit. And I know you recorded a podcast with Kiefer and Nick with the Proven crew, where you kind of talked about takeaways from quarterfinals as a whole. If you were to boil that down a little bit from the Proven side, whether from programming, procedure, how it's the test and everything is administered right now in quarterfinals, what were the big standouts?
I mean, I think broadly speaking, the programming, if you look at it as a 7-stage start to the season, meaning 3 open tests and 4 quarterfinal tests, I think actually was pretty good. Again, obviously we could argue about programming 6 ways to Sunday. That happens every year. Everybody has opinions. I certainly do. I don't think I would love to have changed some of the tests, seen something different, but I think broadly speaking, if you look at the 7 workouts, we got a decent balance. My biggest, I guess, kind of quote unquote complaint would just be finding a better way to balance the tip of the spear and the participatory nature of quarterfinals, and finding a little bit better balance of kind of satisfying both of those groups. To me, the elite athletes worked really short, really execution heavy all weekend long. Whereas your mid-level, your kind of quarterfinal fringe athlete or your mid-tier quarterfinal athlete, they definitely got a more varied stimulus and kind of check on their abilities. Whereas the elites, it was basically you need to go fast, you need to not screw up, and that's basically it. And that's what kind of quarterfinals felt like. It felt like you just need to go really fast and make absolutely no mistakes. And there's a time and place for that. Personally, I think the further you get in the season, the more that should be a priority. I would love to see a little bit broader time domain, broader modality tests at this stage of the season. So yeah, I guess from a programming standpoint, that would be my big takeaway. Is I would love to see a longer event. I'd love to see athletes having gone 20 minutes qualifying for semifinals, whereas most athletes didn't really go above 12 minutes the entire first stage of the season. Over 7 workouts, they didn't work longer than 12 minutes. And to me, you're omitting a pretty glaring aerobic time domain there. So that's kind of my big, I guess, complaint, if it will come from purely a programming standpoint. Outside of that, I think it was fine. But again, I just don't know. It feels like CrossFit said the quiet part out loud about video review, which I don't love. It's like, rather than coming out and saying pretty broadly, like, we're not really going to look at videos. Like, honestly, I joked this weekend. I'm like, just keep it to the old school where you're like, hey, you're required, like, we're going to ask for one video after the fact. At least put that base level of accountability on athletes that then, like, hey, if you plan on qualifying to the next stage, if you're in the top 500 worldwide, we're going to ask for one video. Don't say which one it is. You can even keep the standards a little bit more lax in the sense of, like, you don't need to have a floor plan, you don't need to set it up perfectly, but like, you need to have a video that shows you doing the workout with a clock in the frame. Like, you can keep it as simple as that, so that at least there's that level of, like, athletes have in the back of their head, like, okay, this is the standard, it's kind of similar to what I'm used to, and at least leave it at that, regardless of what depth you go as CrossFit to actually look at those videos, firmly review them, fine tooth comb them, but at least, like, set the standard that there's some accountability coming. Because I think, like, being a dad now, you're like, hey, like, no, there's a standard, like, you set expectations, and like, you have to, you kind of have to meet them. At least it puts that slight level of fear that, like, okay, video reviews coming, it doesn't need to be perfect, but at least I need to have my performances, validated, up to snuff. And that still leaves the gate open for participation, because again, it's like, if you're not planning on going to semifinals, like, we don't care, just use your affiliate judge, your affiliate manager validates it, and that's the end of the story. Whereas, like, again, if you're taking this seriously and you plan on advancing, at least have one video for us. So again, I think that, to me, again, that's probably going back to maybe more old school thinking, where, because I'm so used to that, like, having to submit one open workout after the open or whatever it is, like, just at least having that level of baseline accountability built into the system, I think makes me feel better as an athlete as well. Because, like, from a coaching standpoint, whatever, but I think for the athletes, like, just feeling like they're on a level playing field, knowing that everybody's going to get a look at their video, and just, thinking that there's going to be a little bit less tomfoolery, broadly speaking, and just kind of having a little bit more trust in the system and your fellow athletes and stuff like that. I think it goes a long way to helping athletes sleep a little bit more at night. Even if, again, there was problems with that system too. Again, no system's going to be perfect, but I think that, at least to me, provides a baseline level of accountability for everybody.
You got into my next question, which was going to be about, trusting the system, and not to make you, sound old, but, back in your day, when you got to the games, like, you looked left and you looked right, and Pat Vellner has said this, you knew that person who was next to you did the exact same thing that you did and earned his way there. Whereas now with this system, there's, it just seems that there's a little bit of a lack of trust. It's like, when you don't have a video review, and you can't obviously watch every single video, that's unrealistic. So you mentioned, having one that you would need to submit, maybe they spot check it, but, what needs to happen, do you think, and kind of grounding this in reality for athletes to, to trust it, to be like, okay, I'm here at the semifinal and these people are legit.
Yeah. And I think that's I think that perspective of Pat is still very much true, but now it's just morphed down to the semifinals level. Like, I think, when you get to the games now, it's like, you've competed at your semifinal, even if you did a different test, like, if you win a semifinal or you come top 2 or top 3, like, you've earned your right to be at the games, no question. Like, even if the programming is different, you've at least beaten a strong field and you deserve to be there. So I think that's, like, maybe a little bit less of a concern now versus, like, all right, now at the semifinals level, is the middle of the pack, are they the people who truly deserve to be there? Because, again, you don't know what, tomfoolery, what range of motion standards, things like that may have happened kind of to get to that point. So, like, a realistic lens to me is, I think, what I said. Like, I think one video being at least reviewed as quality check is, I guess I would say, enough to give athletes that level of confidence that, like, okay, everybody put their best foot forward in quarterfinals, in the qualifying process to semifinals. Nobody was trying to skirt the line, like, nobody was trying to kind of manipulate the system in any way, shape, or form. And at least they put their best foot forward. Like, and that's really all you can ask in an event where there's a high level of participation. And again, you can't have this completely scrupulous all 4 workout video review for hundreds or thousands of athletes. Like, that's always just going to be unrealistic, in my opinion. But at least, like, you've done enough to give people a good level of confidence that, like, okay, you know, hey, I made it, and like everyone else around me, we earned our way here, and now we get to fight for our shop. So like, yeah, I guess to me that would kind of be the baseline, and very realistic. Like I think that's something that could have been done this year and would have given a lot of people a little bit more confidence in kind of the process and how they were going through things.
Yeah.
1,000-foot view then, where does this rank in all of the different systems and iterations that we've had to qualify people to the next stage?
Ooh. I guess, I don't know, I'd give it maybe like a 7.5 out of 10. Like if I had to give it like a ranking scale, like I think we're in a decent place. Like, I don't mean to obviously come across as like humdrum and like hyper negative on the sport. Like I'm very much not. Like I'm actually, again, like I have athletes of all levels, whether it's games, whether it's semis or semis adjacent, that they got a great test to start the initial phases of the season. I don't think any of my athletes got screwed. I don't want to come across overly negative as far as kind of like talking about what I think could be better. Like I say all of that in the caveat that I love this sport and I love like I want it to continue to grow and be a place where the up and comers have their chances and you know, but I guess yes, like overall it's in a pretty good place. It just needs tweaks. And I think that's the biggest thing is like it mostly just needs relatively minor adjustments. Like nothing, I don't think anything I said is like massively groundbreaking or requires a huge financial investment or a massive overhaul. It's just small tweaks to what they're currently doing that just provide a little bit more fairness, level playing field. And you would hope that these are conversations and feedback that's pretty readily available because I don't think anything I'm saying is like a massive hot take. Like it's not something that every coach in the space isn't thinking in or athletes are talking about. I think it's all very reasonable stuff that would help kind of move the sport, continue to move the sport in a better direction. So yeah, like I said, I think it's in a pretty good place, all things considered, even if there are its flaws and we may not see as much um, kind of like linear participation from those up and coming athletes. That's not to say that, like, again, NorCal qualifiers were held way before everything else. So, like, a lot of athletes who, frankly, if they were a little worried about where they might be able to get a spot to compete, hopefully they did those qualifiers just knowing that at least it's right on the front. And I can get some clarity really early on. And I know that, okay, I've got this one event out on the calendar. And then the rest of the season, we'll kind of see how it flows from there, at least from a North America perspective. And obviously, like, yeah, my perspective might be a little biased because most of my athletes are frankly either Australian or North American. Like I have a couple of Europeans, but like, like over in Oceania, it's pretty straightforward. Oceania region's all that matters, and we got Torian. Pretty straightforward. North America, again, it's like that's where kind of the other, a lot of the conundrums kind of come in for athletes. Is like, what do I do? What's my schedule look like? Where am I trying to qualify?
Two questions. First one is 2,000 for the cutoff line for semifinals and quarterfinals too much?
I don't think.
I'll preface this with like if you go back for older, we'll say 2018 at least, when there was a higher participatory number than there is now. You're looking at 50 to 60 athletes in each regional that were eligible.
Yeah.
And 8 to 9 regions at that point. It seems like we have inflated that pool. So I'm curious if that's enough. You can think on that for a sec if you need. And the other my backup question was anyone that stood out to you in the proven quarterfinals setup, an athlete that overachieved, someone that brought something to the table that you weren't expecting. I know you guys touched on that a little bit in the pod, but yeah, something that stood out now that you thought about it.
Yeah, so I guess so initially my thought was no. I thought 2000's fine, but like when you frame it like that, it is a pretty, going from basically call it 350 or 450 up to 2000 is a little bit of a drastic jump. But I guess the reason I feel like it's okay is because it's kind of a last it's athletes' last ditch effort to try to qualify for those at the tippy top. Like if you go to 2 in-person semifinals and you're 1 or 2 spots out, you have to like your chances at online semis by that point. Once we get to that phase of the season. But I kind of like the bigger number, assuming that there's a decent video review process and they're looking at, because again, it's a small enough field that at least they're looking at one, maybe two workouts, hopefully all of them for the top 50 or so. But like, as assuming that if we kind of establish that as the baseline, I kind of like 2000, because going back to my earlier point about giving athletes another opportunity to compete who are maybe up and coming, kind of cut their teeth, get some data. Like, I like that it opens up the field a little bit at a pretty high level for athletes who are maybe on the fringe. Like, and I think maybe it's a little too deep. Like, I think, again, like I have an athlete, Billy, who is like 200th in the world in quarterfinals, is probably going to miss an in-person semifinal, but she's like obviously very fit and is very close to that kind of level. And she was around 200. So that, to me, like, I haven't really looked at, if I know any athletes in the 1500 to 2000 range. Like, I don't really know what that level of athlete looks like after quarterfinals. But yeah, I do like it as kind of broadening the field a little bit for a high level competition to kind of wrap up the season. So yeah, I kind of like where the number's at. As far as like what stood out at HQ, I mean, honestly, I think, to me, if I had to pick one athlete that kind of really outperformed and like kind of really outshined all weekend, like Riley Beebe, who was like had a lot of success in the team division, is kind of up into the individual female category now. She ended up finishing, I think it's like right around like 35th or 40th in the world in quarterfinals. Like, I guess from just a pure, how we did and how our scores stacked up over the course of the weekend, like that to me would probably be the standout. Like, as far as who just looks really good and is in a really good place with their fitness right now and kind of made some massive steps over the last, basically 12 months. Like, that would be kind of my standout more broadly. For me, it was more like looking at my athletes specifically. Like, again, I had Liv, Chris, and Billy there that weekend that I coach, and just seeing those nuanced improvements, like looking at one or two of each of their performances and just being able to look at them honestly and be like, look, 7 months ago, that's a totally different workout. And being able to have that really good data point to look at and be like, wow, like we actually did a lot better than I was expecting here. Like, it really shows the off season's paying off and we're kind of putting work in all the right places. So, and those were all like kind of little things, like Liv on the handstand push-ups, Chris on the rowing and the barbell cycling workout, Liv on the high grip workout, Billy on the deadlift workout, like just kind of like little things like that, where I look at an athlete's performance in a specific workout, and just as a coach, it gives me a really good reinforcement that the things that we're working on are the right things, and we're actually making some really solid strides in the right direction.
Tim, this is the last question I have, but you've seen so many iterations of the CrossFit Games season that I'd love to find out where you fall in sort of the pessimism optimism scale of the future of this as we move into the coming years, because it seems like every year something changes and there's a little like uncertainty. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, how does that affect the way that you view the future of the sport from a pessimism and optimism standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to just kind of go purely on vibes at in-person events, the level of competition, watching up and coming athletes coming through the ranks, seeing the interest through Proven, through, like, and just kind of look at the top level of the sport, like, I'm still incredibly optimistic on the future. Like, watching the games last year, being there, obviously coaching, and like seeing the fire and the drive there, seeing a little bit of the turnover of like the kind of change of the guard. I think this is like maybe you could say the second really turnover of the guard, as far as like seeing some of those, athletes that were at the top of the sport for a long time, seeing them move on, seeing the new faces come up and solidify themselves. All of that to me still gives me a lot of really good positive vibes on the future of the sport and what this could be and where this could be going. So I feel very good about that. The qualifying stuff, honestly, maybe I'm like, because I'm so in the weeds with it all the time, and like Caitlin, my wife, will give me a lot of crap sometimes about being too narrowly focused a lot of the time. Like, for me, it's like it's all day to day. It's like, all right, week to week, we're programming with athletes. We're like, whatever comes out, whatever this qualifying structure is, whatever, it's what we're operating in. We have a job to do. Our job is to qualify for the games. Like, I don't sit back and kind of second guess it as much. And also, I think because, again, I've seen it so many times as an athlete and a coach, I've seen the changes. I've tried to qualify so many different ways. I've coached athletes to qualify so many different ways. It almost kind of feels normal at this point to just not have consistency. So it's like, it's almost like, I don't know, maybe like a little Stockholm syndrome or something, where it's just kind of, it's like, oh no, it just kind of changes. And then we adjust to the changes, and then we think something is better, and then we change it again. So I guess, yeah, it almost just kind of feels normal at this point to me, where we try something for 2 or 3 years. We think we can do something better. We find some things are better, find some things are worse. Then we try it again, and just kind of, we keep evolving on it and trying something new. And I mean, I guess my big hope would be like just some steadiness from CrossFit, from like a leadership and what team is in place from them, so that those ideas can start to be more fruitfully evolved on and methodically over the course of a 5 to 10 year span. Like, I feel like, especially in the last 7 or 8 years, especially, there's just been some changes in ownership, some changes in leadership, roles and responsibilities. Like, and when you have that turnover, it can be hard for any company to kind of really focus on the mission at hand and make small tweaks versus sweeping adjustments, because sweeping adjustments are happening elsewhere. So it just kind of feels like if they can find a good period of stability, I think that would flow down nicely to the sport as well, to find a good period of stability where feedback is really heard and the small changes can be made, and we don't have these kind of massive changes on a more regular basis. So yeah, that would be my philosophical take, I guess. Like, my hope would be first they find some stability and that kind of settles, and that lets everybody focus on their job and kind of fine tuning their aspect of the sport, or the brand or whatever it may be, a little bit more readily, consistently, for a longer period of time, like not a year or two.
I'll accept that. Thank you.
I like Tim the philosopher.
Yeah.
It's fun sometimes. It's the fun part of coaching too. You got to fire people up sometimes. You got to think a little bit cerebrally about how they approach things out of the gym. Yeah, you got to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Being a dad helps too, because you're trying to manage emotions on a regular basis. So gives you a little bit more level head.
And athletes in competition can be very similar to a toddler sometimes, with the ups and downs. So
100%. Yeah. Oh no, there was the joke Liv made. We were at qualifying last year, and we went to TFX. She competed, and I was like, this is like, I like this setup. It gives me those old school feels. Like, it kind of reminds me of my first regional. And she's like, when was that? And I was like, oh, 2013. And she looks at me and she goes, I was in kindergarten.
Oh man.
And I was like,
yikes.
I need a coffee. I need a minute to think about
coffee and some ibuprofen.
Yeah.
Again, you were literally my son's age when I went to my first regional, and that is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
So yeah, it gave me a good chuckle and a good little a life check of like, yeah, oh wow, like, Liv is really, she's been doing it forever, but man, she's still young, got a great runway and career ahead of her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt old in that moment too.
Yeah. Oh. You guys got anything else?
No, that was a great perspective to end on. I like it. It's always good catching up for sure.
Well, what's on the horizon for you, Tim? What do you got coming up other than semifinals?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, that's about it, man. We got pretty busy stretch. I mean, I'm down at Mayhem in basically 2 weeks now, week and a half, something like that. So I'll be there coaching Liv and Chris. We've got, I think, 7 proven athletes competing that weekend. And then I'll probably be at Syndicate, and then I'll be down at Proven for all mine semis. Then we got the game. So, I mean, we're in the thick of it now, but also this is the most fun phase of the season for a coach, I think. Just being in the point where the rubber meets the road, the off season's over, you've put in most of the work that you're going to this point, and now it's just helping athletes get on the floor and execute. And that's the stuff that fires you up and is the most exciting as a coach. That's what I love to do, is to actually be there in person, running through the weekend with them, trying to get every ounce of juice for the squeeze that we can. And yeah, so I'm fired up.
Cool. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, man. We always appreciate your perspective on everything, and all the best moving forward, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for today. For Tim Paulson, Lauren Khalil, and Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. Take care of each other. Be better, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
1, 2, 3, go! Like a kiss at the start of a first date. If it's good, I don't want to wait. When the feeling's right, I'm taking it.